Hello and welcome back to my series on learning Java, and today we will be talking about methods. Methods have a lot of purposes, but generally the idea is that we use them to organize our code for repetitive tasks. Anything we want to be able to repeat, we want to put it in a method so that we can call it multiple times. The idea of a method is that we give it some inputs, sometimes they're called parameters, and it outputs something else. And it has some code in the middle. So we're going to define a method called printFact. So I just put a bunch of words in front of there. Why'd I put all those words there? Public and static are called access modifiers. We'll talk about those later. For now, just know that these mean that I'm able to call it in here. If I don't do that, I have to do a lot of other crazy things that I don't want to have to do. So that's what those are going to do. They're also here. Public static void main is a method that runs when you try to run a program. It looks a little bit different usually, but that's what this does. Main is what we consider to be the running function, and we have to call, it's a method, we have to call every other method. We call a method by writing its name, and then parentheses. Usually in those parentheses, we put our parameters, but this method printFact doesn't have any parameters. And void tells us that it doesn't return anything either. So it's going to run some code, but it doesn't take any inputs and it doesn't give any outputs. So for example, let's say we're going to print Java is a great language. Okay, I've never seen that before. But that is correct. So you just need double quotes to create a string. But when I call printFact, it's going to print this. So all this, Java is a great language. That would be our output. You'd see that. Let's do something a little bit more complicated. Find another method. I'm going to use public static so I don't have to do funky things in order to call this. And this time, it's going to have int in front of it instead of void. Int means that it's going to return an int type. And my editor will yell at me until I make it return an int type. And I'll explain how to do that. We're also going to give it a parameter. I'm going to call it end. The goal of this function is to calculate the sum of all of the integers up to a particular number. So end is our last number to add, and then we're going to return the sum after that. Again, I use curly braces for a block, and this is what I said the error. It must return a result of type int. We return something using the return keyword. So I could return 2. Work. Not what I want it to do, but it won't throw any errors now. Instead, I'm going to use something from our loops video. So we're going to find a sum equal to 0. We're going to use a for loop. Start at 0. I'm going to call my index or looping variable I. I want it to go until it reaches end. Actually, I want it to use end. So I'm going to make this is greater than or equal to. I have to put greater than and then that's a less than and equal to, less than or equal to. I put a less than character and then an equal to character, and that'll mean I'm going to run it if I is less than end or I is equal to end, and if I is greater than end, then it won't run. Again, I++, so it counts up by 1 every time, and we're just going to add 1. So we're going to add I sum. That'll add every number between 0 and end. And at the end, I'm going to return my variable sum. Right now, I can call sum of 2. This method will return 3. Oh, and it helpfully told me what the name of the parameter is. My editor does this. Not a lot of editors do that, I don't think. This will return 3. We won't see anything because we never told it to print. So instead, I can put this entire method call inside my print function, because the code knows to take that, and then once it returns a value, replace this with the output value. So this will output 3, and then we'll print 3. Let's define variable int. I'm going to call it big number. Do whatever I want. I'm going to make it 99. Sum big number. So do the same thing as the first one, except now it's going all the way up to 99 instead of stopping at 2. And I put 4950. You can do the math if you'd like. Now, I talked about comments in the first video. We can have these comments with a double slash that end at the end of the line, or we can have these kind of comments with an asterisk that can last multiple lines. Add another asterisk. You'll see it says Java doc comment. DOC doc, short for documentation, because it tells somebody else who's using our method what it does. So if I put these, and then if I put both asterisks and then I return, you'll see it comes up with these at param and at return, and that shows up when I type in things. So I'm going to describe what my method does. Calculate sum of all integers up to a particular number. End is last number to include. And returns sum. If I hover over sum now, it'll show me this. This is my description, the parameters, and there's only one of them, and what it returns. It's a really neat thing that some editors do, and these dot comments are really helpful. If I was in another editor, maybe it wouldn't show exactly the same way, but I'd still probably be able to find the documentation for this method because it's in this file. Okay. One more kind of method. So we've seen this one, no parameters, no outputs, no return. This one parameter, it's an int, one output, it's an int. I'm going to do something else now. This is going to do the same thing as the previous method. So it's still going to return an int, but I'm going to call it recursive sum. Recursive is a word in programming that means it calls itself. This one I'm actually going to have 2 parameters so we can see a little bit more of what it's doing. One of them is going to be a string. I'm going to call it printable because we're going to be printing this one. And when my sum equals 0, I'm going to do something funny. If n is greater than 0, and greater than 1, I'm going to call recursive sum, which is the method I'm working in. In this way, the method will keep calling itself, but there's something specific about what I want to do with it. -1. Every time I call it again, end will go down by 1. Semicolon to end a line. I'm also going to print the printable. But if end is 1, because end could be 1 when it goes all the way down to 1, the sum is just 1. And I don't even have to say that because I'm shortening this. I want to return sum plus end. This is an expression. I could put parentheses around it. I don't have to. the computer knows that if I say return, I want everything after that to be an expression that is returned by the function. So if end is 1, it's going to return 0, because I never changed sum, this didn't run, plus 1. It'll return 1. That makes sense. The sum of all numbers up to 1 is 1. If it was 2, it would run this once. It would change sum to be 1, because it's running sum, this function again for 1. And we already said the sum of 1 up to 1 is 1. And then it's going to go over here and add sum 1 to 2. Because that's the value passed in. And so it'll return 3. Let's see what happens if we let's run this. For 2 again. I'm going to make the string Java. We'll print Java. Java again. And 3. It'll not right. Actually won't do this. It'll only print Java once. Because we call it once. The other unhelpful thing about being able to see that directly in here is that it's not always in the right place, but it's not actually in the code and I can't delete it. Back to here. This will run once, and this if will get called because the sum end is greater than 1 here. Then we're going to call end 1, where we're going to call it for end being 1, and so we won't run this again. This block of code will only run once during this call when end is 2. And then it's going to output 3 because the sum of 1 and 2 is 3. If I print, I can instead call this for 99 again, let's say, and string. It'll output 98 hyphens. And 4950. So it's returning the same number, but it's also going to print that printable a particular number of times, the number of times that the recursion gets called. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.